Shannon, we got Tyler on the line here. What do you want to ask him?
How conservative are you being on underwriting? Because I feel like we're not there on price because we've just, layered on the conservativeness that I think we're writing ourselves out of some deals.
We cannot be overly conservative. We have to be precise. It's an iterative process, but we've got to surround ourselves with the appropriate team members who can give us that direction. The other thing too is we invest in outsourcing our analyst work to a team that is much, much smarter than you and I, because these people are going to be so much farther in the weeds that they can be more precise than myself or my business partner or the rest of our team. So that's been really important for us. So I'll say stay conservative, but make sure you're precise.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe with Four Oaks Capital. Very excited for today's show. It's another one of our Ask the Expert episodes, and we have two amazing guests on the line with us. We have Tyler Chesser and Shannon Kiefhaber. So Tyler, love everything about you. Been following you for a while now, been on your podcast. Super excited to have you on the show today. So that said, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much. And you love everything about me. I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Everything. Absolutely. That. Yeah. The map on your wall, the bookshelf. It's just everything. So
you don't know about the skeletons in my closet. Maybe we'll talk about that today. Who knows?
All right. Hey, let's bring some skeletons out. Maybe I'll change my opinion of you by the end of this one. But so let's talk about you. Let's talk about your background and history, because of course that's my favorite subject is Tyler Chesser. So bring it.
Absolutely. No, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you, Brian, and Shannon as well. Thank you. And everybody listening, thank you for listening in today. But, a little bit about my background. I got started as a professional in the corporate world, in corporate America. And I was actually started in sales, and then I was doing marketing and international marketing research, market research. And I was always fascinated with branding. I was always fascinated with, the psychology of business and human behavior and consumer behavior. So that's why I got into marketing. And I learned fairly quickly after a few years, and it actually took me a little bit of pain to realize this, is that while I was fascinated with that function of business, I was not fascinated with the politics of corporate America. And so it took me a while to figure out, all right, the answer to this is not getting my resume ready for another organization. My answer is to put my ladder on a different wall and climb a different ladder. And so, I kind of raised in middle class, middle America, and I never once thought I would be an entrepreneur or an investor. Mm-hmm. I thought success for me was to climb, a corporation. And so I ultimately got into real estate through asking questions and surrounding myself with people who I saw as successful, and ended up getting my real estate license and started selling commercial real estate, over the course of a few years. And so that got me in the business. And then I started investing along the way and, learning about the multiple streams of income and all the beautiful things that we love about real estate. And that's really how I got started in the business. Yeah.
So another corporate America dropout, I guess. So yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So you were a commercial broker, you say, and now you're in the syndication world and buying apartments as an investor. What drove you to make that switch?
I just became fascinated with, just all the benefits of real estate. And I'm always been a salesperson at heart, so to speak, but I can't sell something if I don't believe in it. And I truly believed in it. So I started investing actively in multifamily as I was kind of known as the apartment guy on the brokerage side. And I just became so enthralled with the investing side of things because, I learned from Robert Kiyosaki that it's not about trading your time for money. It's about trading your resources for more resources that can then, allow you to be multifaceted. And so I just became enthralled with investing and, grew that to a point where it made sense for me to say, hey, look, if I'm really going to scale this thing, I need to make sure that I'm serving the other individuals who are other brokers, and I'm not taking their commissions, and I'm growing that. And so they know that, I have their best interest at heart, and I'm not looking to take money off of their table. And so that was the decision behind that. But it's, it's a long-term game. So the pivot has served so far. So we'll see what happens next.
Yeah, so interesting. And I always like the transitions to talk a little bit about that. What were the challenges? Obviously there's a lot of benefits that I think are clear and present between, moving from a broker to an investor, but what were the challenges?
Probably many of the challenges are really related to reputation and branding in the marketplace, at least from my perspective, because I was very well known as a very active commercial real estate broker who specialized in multifamily. And so for that, it took a while. I mean, it took a course of, probably a year or more for the marketplace to have a different picture in their mind about who I was and what I was doing, because blessed and grateful to have been able to develop a reputation and, an essence in the marketplace for being a practitioner. But, the switch, it's like turning around a big ship, it doesn't turn around on a dime. And it took some time. It took a lot of conversations. It took updated branding. So I'd say that was a challenge, but of course, patience as well, because in the brokerage world, even if you're brokering large commercial properties or commercial multifamily properties, those transactions are long, but on the investing side, it requires even more patience. So I think it was like the double amount of patience required for me to make that transition.
Okay. Now, just curious. A lot of people who are starting out, they look at the brokers as like this impenetrable veil, because I'm sure you've seen it from the broker side, where somebody who's brand new and questionable about whether they can close, you're probably not going to spend a lot of time with them. Did you face similar problems with other brokers who knew you as Tyler the broker instead of Tyler the buyer?
Yeah, the interesting thing, the first thing that myself and my business partner, so my business partner was also a former broker as well. He came from more the institutional side, and I actually built a boutique brokerage myself. But the first thing that we ran into was, hey guys, wait a minute. If we sell you this deal, because we know you, we respect you, we know that you guys are experts in the marketplace, we appreciate that. But how do we know you're not going to try to take our commission? How do we know that you're not going to take, 50% of our fee off the table? So that was our biggest uphill battle.
Yeah.
But of course, I mean, at the end of the day, everybody wants to know that they're spending their time wisely. And that's what brokers want to know as well.
Yeah.
So that was the headwind that we ran into. So yeah, I can appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but definitely from a different angle, and I can definitely appreciate that. I mean, brokers, they work hard for their money, and it comes only when a purchaser completes a sale. So wondering about whether or not they're going to get half a paycheck is real, very real for them. So Tyler, tell me this. Tell me what your big burning why is. What's your motivation? What drives you to be successful?
Well, it kind of goes back to the transition from the corporate world to being an entrepreneur. And that was really, looking back, I didn't realize this at the time, but I was kind of tolerating my life. And I say that a lot because I feel like it really resonates with me, and maybe it resonates with other people too. And you kind of step back and observe the circumstances of your life, and you say, all right, am I really enthralled by this? Am I really fulfilled by this? Or am I just kind of tolerating the day to day? And I actually realized that I was tolerating it. And of course, there's many people who can find fulfillment in corporate America or within large organizations. But for me, what I found was that if I could give myself financial freedom and time freedom and geographic freedom, and surrounding myself with people who are up leveling themselves, who are up leveling other people, giving myself the opportunity to impact other people as a result as well, and invest in myself and up level my mindset, up level my knowledge, my team, the people around me, and continue to expand, then I could live a life of fulfillment. And so that's, apartments and multifamily is kind of I just look at it as a vehicle. It's a vehicle towards creating outcomes that I want in my life. And so the why for me is to live a life of fulfillment and to give that to other people and to show other people. That's why I created Elevate Podcast, is because we talk about, hey, what is it that you're doing to expand as a human being, expand as a person, as well as use a practical vehicle like real estate to provide for your needs otherwise. So I just want to show more people that it's possible, and that it all starts with your beliefs. Do you believe it's possible? And if so, then let's take action. So that's really my big why.
Yeah, a lot of stuff in there that resonates, and I think a lot of people just tolerate their jobs and tolerate their lives. And I like how you put that. That was very, very informative on that one. But yeah, and then elevate, getting better. I love that idea. And like I said earlier, you got a great podcast, and anybody who's listening, go check it out. Elevate Podcasts on all the major podcast apps. But so let's dive back into the history and the flow of the business. You transitioned from the commercial brokerage, you started getting into multifamily. Can you talk to us about one of the specific deals you did, and maybe what you had to do to elevate to get that deal across the finish line?
Yeah, I mean, I could look back and kind of share, a bunch of general experiences. And, for me, my path has been start small, make the mistakes on a small scale and then go a little bit bigger and then go a little bit bigger. And so that's been my path. And I started investing in multifamily with my own money. And I'll tell you that I made every single mistake in the book, I feel like. And now, granted, I continue to make more and more mistakes, but hopefully to a lesser degree. But I started investing about 5 years ago in multifamily. And, as we've continued to scale, I mean, our approach now is we buy 1 to 300 unit value add BC deals across a general, geographic footprint that makes sense for us, within about 3 to 4 hours of our headquarters, so to speak. And so, that's our approach. But I will tell you that right now in the current marketplace, we're very opportunistic. And what I mean by that is, it may not fit in the exact box that I just described to you, but we will consider alternative opportunities. And what I mean by that is, if there's a class A deal that makes sense and it fits sort of in a risk reward balance, we'll consider that. Typically, we'd like to see a deal where we can add value from an operational perspective or a physical perspective or what have you. But if there's an opportunity that we feel like is priced appropriately and that we can take action and we can achieve a certain yield, we'll do that. We're also looking at, mixed use deals. And of course, retail is one of the most challenged asset classes in the marketplace, but perhaps there's an opportunity for us to capture, a part of that market cycle. Because this, every single economy, whether it's a sub-market or a macro economy, a micro economy, there's a part of, the cycle that we've got to pay attention to. So we're very opportunistic, but that's kind of the general approach that we take. And, we partner with accredited investors on those acquisitions and business plans.
Nice. Yeah. And you bring up, retail, which has been hammered, but I mean, the way I look at it, retail's on sale right now, and I think, a lot of the hotels and even office space in certain areas are very well valued for people who, like you, are opportunistic and know what they're looking for and are ready to go. I mean, eventually, I hope, and knock on wood, we're going to be back to normal business. And eventually those retail things are going to open back up. Offices are going to have people back in them. And, right now is a good time to move towards those. But anyway, I appreciate that very much. So let's talk about what's next for you.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited about the opportunities in the marketplace. And I think that anytime you have a disruption, there's always going to be new opportunities as you grow and as you go. So, we definitely want to scale our company and our acquisitions and, just really the assets that we, manage and deliver, beyond expectations. So, we're definitely in this for the long haul and we're continuing to grow there. But, beyond that, I have such a passion for high performance and really exceeding my own potential and sharing that with other people around me. So I am a high performance business coach for real estate investors and salespeople as well. And myself and my business partner within that endeavor, Trevor McGregor, have launched Elevate High Performance Coaching Academy. And it's amazing. It really is amazing. And it helps people really get out of that tolerating their life into developing a set of circumstances where they can design a life of their dreams. And it sounds corny and all this stuff, but it's a way for us to really kind of compress decades into days. So that's really what's continually next, but it's all about, continuing to raise the bar. And I'm excited for each and every day.
All right. Awesome. I like it. We'll put some information about the Elevate High Performance Coaching in the show notes for anybody who's interested. And just curious, how loud is that hammering? You guys hear that now?
I can hear it.
Pretty loud.
Pretty loud?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in the basement. There's one small thing he's doing, and it's directly underneath me. But all right, we're going to try to push forward. And sorry about that, guys. So that said, we're going to switch gears a little bit here and bring on Shannon. So Shannon, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So do us a favor and tell us all about you, your background, your history, and kind of what got you into, wanting to invest in apartments.
Yeah, sure. So I am a real estate investor, portfolio of residential and commercial properties. I graduated Georgia Tech with a degree in civil engineering. I've been working in the industry, the energy infrastructure space for the past 10 years. And I am now currently starting to step into more of an asset management role into my family's commercial and industrial portfolio. So my background, again, I was born into a very entrepreneurial family. My mother built and sold several companies, and my dad took that money and invested it into real estate. So I had tremendous, parents to learn from who taught me, principles of live under your means. And my personal favorite from my mom was, if it was easy, everyone would do it.
Mm-hmm.
And, everyone likes to think, you own your own business and you make your own hours, but I can guarantee you, when you own your own business, you work harder than anyone in corporate America.
Yeah.
And I got to see that firsthand. I ended up going to college, got an engineering degree, met a fighter pilot, and have been living the Navy life for the past 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
They've been amazing, but during those 10 years, we kind of kept saying, we're going to wait to invest in our future. There, this time is going to come in the future where we're going to start investing. And, I finally said, what are we waiting for? And so we finally kind of took a step back and said, let's purposefully, kind of get back to the roots, the way I was born and raised, which was starting with a single family purchase and kind of grew that portfolio, my own personal portfolio here in Virginia Beach. I live in Virginia Beach and invest in Hampton Roads, and then and also in Florida. And during once we purposefully started investing, met another real estate investing couple that we hit it off because we were the only people our age that were doing this, that were living under our means, saving our money, buying real estate.
It's crazy, right?
In our 20s.
Yeah.
And no one seemed to understand. We didn't really have anyone to talk to about it. And so we hit it off, and since then we've done over 150 real estate transactions, flipping houses. We have full-time dedicated construction crews, and we have investors that fund the purchase and rehab of our properties. But we really, decided we want to scale, and we have the capacity to scale. And so that's kind of where we're at now is, we started a 25/8 capital group, and, have been underwriting deals and submitting LOIs, but just haven't really landed that first large multifamily project.
Nice. So, and we talked about this, a week or so ago, and I was very impressed by what you have done. You've gotten so many, transactions already done. And for you, this is going to be much more of a sidestep than a drastic change in direction. You've got a lot of the foundation that you need. You got the system set up, and it's just a matter of taking everything you've built and just slightly shifting directions a little bit. So you weaved a little bit of your why into what you just said, but if you could, distill it down to, a couple of sentences, what's your big burning why?
So my parents worked tremendously hard to build the real estate portfolio that they have, and they deserve to retire and and live off the fruits of all of their efforts. And they're a good example of kind of the mom and pop operation where there was no exit strategy, there were no systems. They built a business that is running them into the ground, and like I said, they've been building the business. They've been working in the business, not building the business. And so for me, it's really the ability to step into, an asset management role, and just there's so much room for improvement and efficiencies and technology and everything that I've learned at my day job as a project manager, and that I've learned from, flipping, really to just be able to take over, relieve this burden and grow a business. And it's funny, we were just mentioning, or Tyler was mentioning, some of his background and not fascinated with the politics of corporate America. And, it's funny, my dad sent me an email last week from 2006. So I was a sophomore in college, and the subject line said sick. I don't remember sending it, but I opened it, and I just started a summer job working in a corporate office. And it was my first exposure because both my parents worked from home. They were entrepreneurs. They own their own businesses. I'd never even seen a corporate office. And in the email, I outlined what I called I'm already sick of working for money. I want my money to work for me plan. And, I was a college sophomore, and I had just read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, my parents could have written this book. God, why didn't they? And it ended with me, thanking them for ruining or maybe saving my life. And, it's funny, life kind of happens. And like I said, I followed my husband's Navy career, and there's no regret there. We lived an amazing life, but my husband just got out of the Navy, and as you know, it's our first time in 10 years that we can choose and be deliberate about where we want to live and the path we want and the life we want to live. And so that life, as we have decided, is an ambitious pursuit of continuing generational wealth and furthering financial literacy. And so I am super passionate about encouraging, and educating others, especially women, about the financial freedom that can be achieved through real estate investing. And again, just working on kind of pivoting and scaling is where I'm at.
Yeah. So, first of all, a lot of goodness in there. And I definitely appreciated that sick email, because I felt that. Unfortunately, I stuck with the job for 20 years. And incidentally, my wife and I frequently debate what's harder, being active duty or being married to someone who's active duty. And 9 times out of 10, she wins. So
I would agree with your wife.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely. I mean, 9 times out of 10, I agree with her. But, when I have one of those really bad days, it's like, no, I win today. But, all right. Well, hey, appreciate everything you've done. But comes to the funnest part of the show for me, where I basically hand you the mic and let you drive. So, Shannon, we got Tyler on the line here. What do you want to ask him?
Yeah, Tyler, I just found it really interesting with your background as a broker. I mean, I feel like you had almost like the insider slip, a couple of the deals, LOIs that we've made and making it to highest and best. And we've just been in almost like interviews, and it's just felt like maybe just that jump from, our kind of domination in the single family world to then being a seat at the table with, larger 25 to 50 unit properties, and just maybe not knowing the certain, I don't know, tactics or words or phrases or buzzwords, or not, I'm not really sure what it is, but maybe what are some unique questions or strategies that you use or ask brokers, as the buyer, to help figure out how to negotiate that winning offer?
No, thank you. That's a great question. By the way, I admire your background as well. So I just wanted to say that. It sounds like you've had a lot of success in real estate, and I think you can definitely leverage that in many ways as you continue to scale. But, the first thing I'll say to the question that you just asked is answer questions before they're asked. And if you want to think about it, like, brokers at the end of the day are wanting to, answer their clients' questions and give their clients assurance that when they spend time with you, it's going to be time well spent and compensated. And so, with that, obviously you've got a track record that's significant, right? You've got a team that you have really put together that you can show that you have what it takes to make this happen. And so, one thing I would suggest for you is, while maybe you don't have the specific track record of the deals that you're looking to purchase, you do have a significant track record. And I'm sure you can leverage those relationships into a further team that can also support, even a more in-depth track record, if that makes sense. So that's the first thing that I would suggest to you. The other thing too is go the extra mile, go above and beyond, and have the conversations before time is of the essence about, hey, what would really, give you comfort in doing business with me, Mr. Broker or Mrs. Broker or whoever it is, before time is of the essence. Like I said, before you're in that best and final and you're competing with 4, 5, 6 other groups, to have that conversation. The other thing too is sweeten the pie a little bit. What can we do to make our deal much more attractive, whether it's hard money, whether it's shortened due diligence time frame, of course, price is in there. But beyond that, how can you strengthen the relationship? Because the relationship is what it's all about. At the end of the day, the broker is going to want to do a deal with a certain group over others. And it's like, hey, do I like these people? Do I enjoy them? Obviously the other stuff is important, but they're going to go to bat for a certain group. And they're going to say, look, I know that this offer seems better, but I'm going to tell you that this group is the group you probably want to go with. Obviously, you make the decision, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, but here's what I would suggest to you, because the best brokers out there are advisors. They're not just paper pushers. They're not like, here's all the offers, let me know what you think.
Pick one. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're going to advise. And so, there's many things you can do, but it is about investing in those long-term relationships. As there's many things you can do. There's handwritten letters, there's gifts, there's all these things, but it is about staying top of mind and all this stuff. But that's kind of a high level, but does that resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm talking to a broker recently that's kind of, my age, my gender, we hit it off. And she was like, people forget, like, we're just normal people too. Like we're, and she felt like she's approached and some just not as an average human being. And so absolutely, that's really helpful. But I would say, several times, when we did lose out, it was on price, and we were told, hey, your team was excellent. You guys were, polished and just brought everything to the table that we asked, but it came down to numbers. And so, my next question was just, how conservative are you being on underwriting? Because I feel like we're conservative on top of conservative on top of conservative, and we're conservative in so many different areas of our underwriting that at the end of the day, we're just not there on price because we've just, layered on the conservativeness that I think we're writing ourselves out of some deals.
Yeah, no, it's a phenomenal question. One thing that I'll say is that the current stage of the market cycle is obviously different than every other stage of the market cycle. So we've got to be very transparent and very aware of where are we in that. And obviously there's a ton of demand for multifamily investments. And so we've got to have that recognition. The other piece of it is it's absolutely a numbers game. I mean, I'll tell you, when we got started in this business, sort of the frame of reference was, hey, you're probably going to look at 75, maybe 100 deals before you close one. I think it's closer to probably to 150 at this point, at least for us. And I'll tell you the reason why I say that is because, like you, we're conservative, but we cannot be overly conservative. We have to be precise. Mm-hmm. So like, as an example, one thing that, has been a topical piece of news that we've been following has just been insurance pricing. Insurance has risen dramatically recently over the past couple of years. And, that's been one of the things that can really make or break deals. But if we look at a deal and say, hey, this is going to be 375 a unit, but it really turns out to be 325 a unit or 350, that can make or break a deal. So precision has become very important to us. And so it's an iterative process, but we've got to surround ourselves with the appropriate team members who can give us that direction. The other thing too is we invest in outsourcing our analyst work to a team that is much, much smarter than you and I. And I mean that with all due respect. I'm a CCIM, certified commercial investment member. I went to study how to be an expert in market analysis, financial analysis, investment analysis, but I still outsource that work because these people are going to be so much farther in the weeds that they can be more precise than myself or my business partner or the rest of our team. So that's been really important for us. So I'll say stay conservative, but make sure you're precise. So it's almost like what Robert Kiyosaki says, there's two sides of the coin. Of course, some people are winning deals by being more aggressive. And so we can stand on the edge and look at that side of the coin. We can also say, well, we're in this for the long haul, so let's be smart. And so let's be conservative and precise. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah. And I'll throw my 2 cents in on this one. There are things that you can control and there's things that you can't control. I can't control where the market goes. I can't control where cap rates go in the future. I can't control where interest rates go in the future. I can't control where rents go in the future. So the things that I can control, that's what we are as precise as possible on. Okay. And those are the areas where we're willing to, to walk the line and be very, like Tyler said, precise on. But when it comes to looking at the future, that's where we tend to be conservative because that's what we cannot control. Everything else we have, a dog in the fight as far as what we can control. Can we control expenses? To a certain degree, absolutely yes. Can we control what the cap rate's going to be 3-4 years from now when we're selling? No, we can't. So we're going to be conservative with that number.
Yeah. And I'd like to add something on that as well, because I think it's such a great point. There was a book that I read a couple of years ago called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. Mm-hmm. And she was the former professional world, poker champion. And what she talks about is like nothing in life or in business is certain, right? When we think about exit cap rates, as an example, we don't know where the future market is going to be, but we can think in bets and we can bet on a certain probability of, hey, are cap rates going to expand? Are they going to compress further? And we look at history and we try to analyze based on that. And obviously there's some speculation involved there, but that helps us, sort of guide our decision making. But I think it's really important.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. One last question. So, like, how much effort are you putting into determining the offer and your LOI? So, we're trying to, like you said, if you anticipate that we need to that we will probably underwrite 100 deals before maybe closing one. That's obviously a tremendous amount of effort, which we're willing to put in. But I think maybe we're putting in too much effort. It feels like sometimes underwriting to put in an LOI, and just interested in your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I would, my suggestion is obviously you're not going to have every piece of information before you submit an LOI, but you want to have a significant amount of data to be able to feel like you're putting your best foot forward. So our kind of rule of thumb is if we have 70 to 80% of clarity around this project, then it's a go for us to put our best foot forward. And, we typically underwrite 30 deals per quarter, and we typically offer on 10. And so, we have to make that decision. And what we've decided recently, especially, is all right, we get seller guidance and we get, sort of whisper price and all this stuff. And we can say, all right, well, maybe we're 5% off that whisper. Maybe we're 10% off. Maybe we're 15. But what we have decided recently, especially, has been, look, we're going to put our best foot forward no matter what, where it makes sense for us. We're not in the business of hurting feelings, and this isn't a business of emotions. And so we put our offers, out there. And so if we do get traction at that point, then we can nip and tuck where necessary. But that's how we handle that. But Brian, is there anything else that you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. We're always sharpening our pencil. We're always, we go in with what we know, and LOI is non-binding. I mean, obviously you don't want to make it a business of submitting LOIs and backing out, but you remember the LOI is non-binding. And in a lot of marketplaces right now, once you even go under contract, you have a due diligence period where your earnest money is fully refundable. So we look at submitting an LOI as we have to have a chance on the property. So do we have to know everything before throwing the LOI in? No, we don't. We'll take a lot of things, and we'll keep track of, the known unknowns, what we're still looking to clarify on. And the biggest thing is CapEx budget and, condition of property. I mean, until you walk the units, you don't know how much you're going to spend to bring things back up. And we're looking at value add plays. On the flip side, we're waiting until we don't put a whole bunch of LOIs out there. My partner who does the acquisitions, he's talking with the brokers frequently. And if we don't have a chance, at the price that we can underwrite it in, or the price that we can purchase it at, we're not going to put an LOI in. So the discussion between him and the broker is like, hey, the highest I can get on this price is 4.7. Is that even worth putting the LOI in? If the broker comes back and says, yeah, put it in, we'll do it. If the broker comes back and says, non-starter, we're not going to waste the time putting the LOI through. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I think some of the nuances in what you guys are saying is actually really helpful. So, I mean, I think in the past I've acted, I think, a little bit more, maybe too transactional with the broker. And I think it sounds like you're just having regular conversations, just open, honest, transparent. And I think that's what's hurt us a few times in the past, is especially from just the single family side, or, where we're buying, these distressed properties, and there's not just that clear and open communication flow. And it seems to be very different in the multifamily or commercial world, where a lot more cards are on the table, where there's a lot more honest and transparent talk about what things are worth, value, rehab costs, things like that.
Yeah. And it is a relationship business. It always is. And I know my partner, Eric, he's, like I said, he's our acquisitions guy. I know he is good friends. I mean, friends with some of the people that are the brokers. And, we've had one broker that's actually invested in more than one deal with us, so we've taken that relationship to the next level. And I think that really helps with, maybe we're not getting the first call when they sign on a property, but, we're in that first round of calls.
Yeah. And it is really important. I mean, I look at the relationships as more transformational type of relationships versus transactional, because whether or not you get that opportunity that you're looking at, you're planting seeds for a long-term relationship. And people, when they see you're out there playing on the field, so to speak, quote unquote, they see that you're a real player. And so they're going to start to bring you opportunities from the next deal. And so I think that's important, because they want to see that, hey, your thinking is in line with what's the reality of the market. Because if you're giving them feedback and you're 25% off where, the market really is, then maybe that's a problem. So obviously let's be aware of that. But having open communication invests in those relationships, and that's the compound effect there, I think, will start to take hold for you.
Yeah, the first couple acquisitions we did, I was running the train on acquisitions. I remember just having a very frank conversation with the broker on a property. I'm like, I think the whisper price was 6.2, and I called her up and I'm like, I can't get above 5.4, and she laughed. And at first I'm like, oh my gosh, I was still new to it. And I thought I was offensive in somehow. And she was basically frank with me and honest with me back. She's like, the owner is dead set on 6.2. Like, we've told him he's not going to get more than 5.6. Like, we are right with you on your numbers. So there's that to play too. But anyway, we're basically at the end of the show today. So I do want to thank both of you guys for coming on. I really appreciate your time here. Got one more question for each of you. And Tyler, you get to go first. How can listeners learn more about you?
I think the best way is to go check out Elevate Podcast on any podcast platform. There's tons of content there. In fact, you can listen to Brian on Elevate as well, but that's the easiest place. And then of course you can find me across social media or tylerchester.com.
Yeah. And I'll just throw a little carrot out there. If you can find the spot where my power went out during the podcast, email me and I'll send you a free something or other. I haven't decided yet. But you'll get something for free from me, but it'll be worth your time. All right. Shannon, same question for you. How can listeners learn more about you?
Yeah, so you can see, pretty much all of our flips. We document a lot of those on Instagram at LV Realty, and then reach out to me on social media. And we also have a website for our capital group, 25-8 Capital, and that just kind of gives a little bit more some bios about the four of us that are in that capital group and looking to start increasing deal flow opportunities and underwriting more deals. Apparently we need the magic number is 100. So we're 50 short.
Yeah. Magic number is about 100. So yeah, keep on pushing. And each one you don't get is just one closer to the magic number. So, all right. Well, I appreciate once again your time and talk to you guys soon, I hope.